back to order. Chairman David Watson of the Budget Committee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to call the Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Here to speak with you about the approval for two different actions. One, I'm asking for an expansion in the budget to the current year, and then we'll ask you to consider passing the 17-18 budget. So yesterday we talked quite a bit about the process of budget amendments, budget setting, all the process that goes in and all the reviews, and including the meeting early Thursday morning, then yesterday afternoon, and the ones prior to that. So I won't go back through those processes other than just to say that I would again appreciate all the involvement by the Commission, especially staff, in trying to put the budget together. It's a pretty big undertaking to do. So the two actions I would ask, first would be the budget you have already passed last year, an amendment to that budget for current year of $3,884,300, and the 17-18 budget, after removing $253,600 for budgeted for the TV show, asking for an approval of $86,035,700 for 17-18.
Thank you, Director. Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee met yesterday and they approved the expansion of $3,884,300 to the 2016-2017 budget. I move to approve.
Thank you, Chairman Watson. We have a motion and a second to approve a budget expansion to the 2016-2017 budget. Is there any discussion? Is there any discussion from the audience or staff? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? A budget expansion to the 2016-2017 budget of $3,884,300 has been approved. Chairman Watson.
Mr. Chairman, the Budget Committee met yesterday and approved the budget of $86,035,500. This amount shows is less the TV show of $253,000. We also met yesterday morning and had several meetings in Nashville. I move to approve this budget of 2017-18.
I have a motion and a second to approve the fiscal year 2017-2018 budget. Is there any discussion from the Commission? Any discussion from the audience? Before we vote on this, let me compliment, and that's not strong enough word, the Budget Committee for their efforts. That had to be the most thorough meeting that I have been a part of in my 5 years to date. It was thorough. I applaud the staff and their thoroughness in preparing for this. And overall, I applaud the frugalness of the Commission and the agency in being stewards of the funds that we have control of. With that, all in favor of the fiscal year 2017-2018 budget as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Fiscal year 2017-2018 budget in the amount of $86,035,500 has been approved. Thank you, Chairman Watson. Appreciate it. Commissioner Bledsoe.
Thank you, Chairman Cannon. Being on the Budget Committee, I just wanted to, since we're here in Crossville and Cumberland County, I wanted to let you all know that part of that budget expansion that we done, a little over $2 million something of it was for a shooting facility here in Cumberland County. And it will be a world-class facility. John Mayer and all the staff have worked well with Mayor Carey, and it is I look forward to getting to use the facility. I mean, it will be a top-notch one, and I just wanted to let you all know that, you know, since we are in Cumberland County, that part of that was going to you. So, thank you.
And it's federal money.
And it was federal money from the Hunter Ed
Yes, sir.
matching, so. And Director Carter played a great part in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the commission. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Director Carter, for all yours and staff's work, and Commissioner Bledsoe, thank you for those comments. Most appropriate. I think the phrase today has been, that's the fun stuff. That's another one of the fun stuff things we get to do today. Commission recognizes Chairman Jeff Cook, Boating and Law Enforcement Committee. Chairman Cook, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Cannon. The Boating and Law Enforcement Committee would like to recognize Chief Darren Ryder to discuss Proclamation 1629 to temporarily suspend no-wake zone at Nickajack Reservoir.
Thank you, Commissioner Cook. Yesterday I presented Proclamation 1629, which is a request to temporarily suspend the no-wake zone on Nickajack Reservoir around the Marion County boat ramp area so they can conduct the outboard drag boat races. And those dates are October 8, 9, and 10 for the hours of 10 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. each day.
Thank you, Darren. The Boating and Law Enforcement Committee yesterday recommended approval, and I so move for approval as well.
Thank you, Chairman Cook. Motion has been made regarding Proclamation 16-29 and appropriately seconded. Is there any discussion on the commission? Any discussion from the public or staff? Hearing none, all in favor of Proclamation 16-29 indicate by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Proclamation 16-29, temporary suspension of no wake zone on Nickajack Reservoir, is approved. Chairman Cook, with your permission, we will enter into the rulemaking hearing. I need to read a statement. Oh, I'm sorry. We have one other matter. Forgive me.
I'm sorry, Commissioner. If you
Commissioner.
trust me, may I take a liberty of making an announcement?
You may. I was expecting it at the beginning of that. Please make this announcement. I'm excited about it.
Yes, I'm sorry. I apologize. In our presence today, we have a gentleman here that, whether he's been plainclothes assignment today, but I'm fixing to blow his cover, I reckon. So we have recently selected our 2016 CFWA Officer of the Year, and that selection, he's sitting back there in the back. His name is Joe Fortner. He is from Region 3, from DeKalb County, here in District 32.
Joe, please stand up so we can recognize you, sir.
So with that, Joe, we're understanding you get all expenses paid trip to the CFWA conference in Baton Rouge. Just get your boat ready, make sure it's running. We may have to go in by boat right now. So looking forward to spending some time with you at the conference, and he'll be in the running with all the other 16 states and territories that are represented at CFWA for the Regional CFWA Officer of the Year Award. And just so you'll know, this is a great kid. He really is. I had the fortune of working with his father, who actually retired from the agency as a wildlife officer for many, many years as a Williamson County officer. So when Cheatham boarded Williamson, me and him get together and work a little, play a little, but we do business. So I really admired and respected his father, who's retired from us. And not only that, he has an uncle in West Tennessee, Billy Ray Fortner, who also has a career retirement with us, with the agency, where he's a supervisor in West Tennessee. He's been taught well, and he's learned well, and he's a hard charger and a great kid. Thank you, Joe.
Chief Ryder, thank you. Joe, on behalf of the commission, I can't tell you how excited we are for you to get this honor, how appreciative we are of your work. The press release goes on about the specific accolades, but you represent this agency and this region well, so thank you for all you do, sir. And I like the new uniform today. That's a good, that's If I haven't missed anything else.
No, sir, other than my technical ability, I need help to get.
All right, let's go ahead and do the introductory statements on the rulemaking. We're going to enter into a rulemaking hearing before the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission to consider the following 5 rules. New Rule 1660-01-29, which deals with rules and regulations governing the Interstate Wildlife Violators Compact. The amendment of Rule 1660-01-04, which deals with rules and regulations for field trials and dog training. The amendment of Rule 1660-01-05, which deals with rules and regulations for fishing. the amendment of Rule 1660-01-14, which deals with rules and regulations for refuges, wildlife management areas, and public hunting areas, and the amendment of Rule 1660-01-28, which deals with rules and regulations governing license and permit fees. My name is Harold Cannon. I will be conducting the hearing. The Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency staff will present the information on the proposed rule once the appropriate committee has been recognized. Commission members will be permitted to comment and ask questions. Likewise, members of the audience will be permitted to comment and ask questions. Staff members and members of the audience wishing to speak should identify themselves before speaking. I reserve the right to limit comments and discussion, particularly in the case of repetition. With that being said, the chair will recognize Chairman Jeff Cook regarding Rule 1660-01-29.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Boating and Law Enforcement Committee would like to recognize Darren Ryder.
Thank you, Commissioner Cook. At this time, Lieutenant Colonel Kate Taylor will present the new rule for Interstate Wildlife Violators Compact.
Good morning. Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to be presenting proposed Rule 1660-01-29, which quite simply outlines the procedure for suspension of hunting privileges relative to the Interstate Wildlife Violators Compact. The Interstate Wildlife Violators Compact is an agreement in which member states can take reciprocal action regarding the suspension or revocation of hunting or permits, hunting, fishing, or trapping. If a person's license is suspended or revoked in one member state, they are subject to suspension and revocation in all member states. There are currently 45 member states in the Interstate Wildlife Violators Compact. Hawaii has recently passed legislation to become a member. The non-member states are Delaware, Maine, New England, New Jersey. In 1999, Tennessee was given the statutory authority under Tennessee Code Annotated 70-1-302, 70-1-305 to join the Wildlife Violators Compact, and it became a member state in 2006. 70-1-305 authorizes suspension or reinstatement of privileges after affording a due process. This rule, 1660-01-29, is necessary to establish what the process is and how this will work. If a non-resident who violates in the state of Tennessee, the officers can cite these non-residents without posting a cash bond so that they would be treated just like an in-state resident would be treated, and issue a citation as opposed to taking them down to be booked and post bond. If a violator does not comply with the citation, the home state is notified and start the process of the license suspension. When the citation is satisfied and proof of satisfaction is sent to the home state, they will reinstate the license for that person. A Tennessee resident who does not satisfy in another member state, if a member state notifies the state of Tennessee a resident did not satisfy that citation, Tennessee would suspend the license until notice was received from the citing state that the citation had been satisfied. This time the license would be reinstated for that person. For a violator who has his hunting, fishing, and trapping privileges revoked in any member state, Tennessee will receive a notification that the Tennessee resident is to been entered into the compact database as revoked. Tennessee would send a notice to that person in the state of Tennessee that his privileges are revoked in this state. And any person who has been revoked may appeal to the agency's executive director and request an informal appeal of that revocation. The appeal that they would have would not be for the facts of the case as they were in the state where they were cited, but the fact if we do not have a similar violation in the state of Tennessee as they had in the state where they were cited. That's all.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a motion for approval of this rule?
So moved.
Have a motion. Do I have a second? And a second. Motion was made by Commissioner Watson, seconded by Commissioner Woodson. Is there any discussion within the commission? Any discussion by agency staff? Any discussion by the public? You're recognized, sir.
Question.
Could you identify yourself again?
Oh,
for
I'm
the
sorry,
record,
Jim,
please?
in 147 Lakeshire. I have a question. With the interstate and international sale of gallbladders from bears, is there a reward or a bounty for a citizen who turns somebody in for transporting bear gallbladders?
I don't believe.
Because it's used in China, as we all know. As
Forgive me for just one moment. I don't believe this rule specifically addresses that.
It does not.
This
This
has
rule
to
does
do
not.
with violations. Let me ask one of our staff folks to get together with you on your question to address that, but that does not,
Okay, I'm
is not impacted by the rule. You're fine. You're perfectly fine. It's just not a part of this rule hearing.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public or questions? Hearing none, I believe we're ready to vote. Danette, please call the roll.
Chad Baker. Jim Bledsoe. Jamie Woodson. Jeff Cook. Bill Cox. Kurt Holbert. Connie King. Jeff McMillan. Jim Ripley.
Aye.
Bill Swan.
Aye.
Trey Teague.
Aye.
David Watson. Harold Cannon.
Aye. Rule 1660-01-29, dealing with rules and regulations governing the Interstate Wildlife Violators Compact passes. Chief Ryder, would you mind getting with our guest a little later in the meeting to answer his question, please? Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Chairman Cook, we will hear from you regarding amendment to Rule 1660-01-04, which deals with rules and regulations for field trials and dog training. Commissioner Cook, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Voting and Law Enforcement Committee would like to recognize Chris Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Might be my first voting and law enforcement presentation that I've gotten to do. I'm excited about it. The first three rules that you're going to hear from me on, I'm going to do just a brief overview of why I'm up here and what all these rules have to do with. And I apologize that I don't have a slide, but I would direct you to your packets that show the red line versions of these rules and what we're changing. Essentially, the first three rules that I'm going to talk to you about all deal with the possession of firearms either on our land or in some manner that our rules would prohibit that possession. And due to changes recently within the state legislature, whether it's guns in parks or guns in bars, you all are well aware that there's been significant changes to the possession laws for firearms. And what these amendments will do is bring us into compliance or ensure that our rules are not in conflict with what the state legislature has clearly indicated as their policy relative to the possession of firearms. So in direct looking first at Rule 1660-01-04 relative to rules and regulations for field trials and dog training, this is a simple amendment that just removes the prohibition for the possession of firearms at all times during a field trial. Certainly a licensed or permitted, someone with a properly permitted handgun carry permit would be still permitted to possess a firearm. This would not change anything other than that. And with that explanation, pending any questions, we'd ask that the commission approve amendment to Rule 1660-01-04 relative to field trials.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
A motion by Commissioner Bledsoe. Do I have a second? Second. Second by Commissioner Holbert, I believe. I hope I heard that right.
I got a question.
Commissioner Cox, you're recognized.
I don't think you can answer this, but in reading this rule, bobwhite quail release shall bear a leg band approved by the Wildlife Resources Agency. I guess two questions. Why? And I know that Ames releases thousands of quail, and pretty sure they don't put leg bands on them.
If I could take a stab at it.
All right.
That specific requirement, and I'll ask someone to correct me if I go wrong, but that specific requirement has to do with our areas, and specifically the use of a callback pin. And what we want to be able to ensure is that people that are putting quail out on our areas are not going out, putting out a call-out pin and in fact trapping wild quail and then removing those from the area. So the leg band would ensure that only those quail that were put out are called back into the pen and then able to be removed. And this, to be clear, Commissioner Cox, this amendment has nothing to do with that provision,
No,
part
I
of the
get that.
rule.
I get that. I was just reading, and we've been doing so much other, I hadn't read this, and I didn't read that this was strictly for our WMAs. It doesn't say that, so it's,
Whatever
looks like
that,
it's for private land too, and that's a good answer.
The requirement is that requirement has been in place for some time, and it is not changing in
But
any
this
way.
is strictly for wildlife management areas. Is that?
I don't know that I can say that with any assurance. I might have to defer to.
Director Carter?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That rule is, that portion of the rule is under review. It's been a long-standing rule, it's been there throughout my career in terms of the leg banding, and it goes with, it's two or three aspects of it. Part has to do with the importation of birds from other states and the impact that has on the avian flu and the movement of those birds, that they have to be proper and brought in from protected sources and all of that. The leg bands were, just as Chris talked about, were originally primarily for callback pins. Very few people apparently are using those anymore, and we're discussing whether or not that portion of that rule is even necessary. So I just wanted you to know that it is under review. We may come back to you for that change.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? Questions from the public? Or comments from staff? Hearing none, I believe we're ready to vote. Mr. Nett, if you would, call the roll.
Chad Baker. Aye. Jim Bledsoe. Aye. Jamie Woodson. Aye. Jeff Cook. Aye. Bill Cox.
Aye.
Kurt Holbert. Aye. Connie King. Aye. Jeff McMillan. Aye. Jim Ripley.
Aye.
Bill Swan. Aye. Trey Teague.
Aye.
David Watson.
Aye.
Harold Cannon.
Amendment of Rule 1660-01-04 dealing with rules and regulations for field trials and dog training is approved. Next is amendment of Rule 1660-01-05, which deals with rules and regulations for fishing. Mr. Richardson, I assume you're going to speak to this as well.
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, while this rule is titled Rules and Regulations relative to fishing, this amendment that we're proposing today has nothing to do with fishing. You can see the red line version in your packet, but essentially the amendment that we're proposing today, currently there is a prohibition against possessing firearms at our agency lakes. And what we're asking the commission to do is remove that language so that anyone who is properly licensed or able to carry a firearm under the laws of the state of Tennessee would be able to carry those firearms in that same manner at our agency lakes. With that explanation, if any questions, commission urges approval of this amendment.
To have a motion for approval. Have motion by Commissioner Bledsoe, second by, forgive me, I couldn't see the end of the table. Thank you, Commissioner Baker. Is there any discussion within the commission? Any discussion with the public, from the public, or from staff? Hearing none, I consider that we're ready to vote. Danette, please call the roll.
Chad Baker. Aye. Jim Bledsoe. Aye. Jamie Woodson. Aye. Jeff Cook. Aye. Bill Cox.
Aye.
Kurt Holbert. Aye. Connie King. Aye. Jeff McMillan. Aye. Jim Ripley.
Aye.
Bill Swan. Aye. Trey Teague. Aye. David Watson.
Aye.
Harold Cannon.
Aye. Amendment of Rule 1660-01-05 dealing with rules and regulations for fishing, if I can talk, passes. Next, we'll consider amendment of Rule 1660-01-14 dealing with rules and regulations for refuges, wildlife management areas, and public hunting areas. Mr. Richardson, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, to sound like a broken record, this, again, is a technical cleanup to this particular rule relative to the possession of firearms on our lands, whether they're WMAs, public hunting areas, or otherwise. The amendments that you see in the red line version of your rule would allow anyone who is properly permitted or licensed or able to carry a firearm under the laws of the state of Tennessee to carry the said firearm when on our land. With that explanation, pending any questions, I would urge approval of this amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Do I have a motion for approval?
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion with the commission? Hearing none, are there any comments or questions from the audience? I believe Commissioner Ripley, you made the motion, is that correct? Can I get affirmation who did the second? Commissioner Cook. Hearing no other discussion, I believe we're ready to vote. Danette, would you call the roll, please?
Chad Baker. Jim Bledsoe. Jamie Woodson. Jeff Cook. Bill Cox. Kurt Holbert. Connie King. Jeff McMillan. Jim Ripley.
Aye.
Bill Swan. Trey Teague. David Watson.
Aye.
Harold Cannon.
Aye. Amendment of Rule 1660-01-14, dealing with rules and regulations for refuges, wildlife management areas, and public hunting areas passes. The chair recognizes Chairman Kurt Holbert with the Government Relations Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Richardson, I'd like to call on you since you're already standing there.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this is in fact a new rule that we're presenting to the commission today. And I am delivering it to you because it comes in part out of discussions that I had last session at the General Assembly. There were attempts by the General Assembly, or there was legislation introduced to create opportunities for non-residents that were born in the state of Tennessee to purchase lifetime licenses, or non-residents that own property in the state of Tennessee to be able to purchase resident cost licenses. In discussions with the General Assembly, I asked that they hold off on considering any legislation because that falls directly within the purview of this commission, and this commission has the authority to consider and create new opportunities or new licenses at any time. This rule would not create any new licenses, and it would not establish any new license fees. What this rule would do, if passed, would say that any person who was born in the state of Tennessee that can prove that through a verified or certified copy of their birth certificate processed through the Nashville office would be able to purchase annual hunting and fishing licenses at the same cost of a resident. All of those licenses, again, would be processed much in the same way that we do our lifetime licenses or disabled veteran licenses. They would be processed in the Nashville office. Those documents would all go through, and then that customer record would reflect that that person was in fact born in the state of Tennessee. Again, there's no new licenses in this rule. It would just allow the opportunity for those non-residents who were born in Tennessee that are coming back home to visit to purchase annual licenses at resident costs.
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. Do I have a motion to adopt this new Rule 1660-01-28? I have a motion by Commissioner Swan. Do I have a second? I have a second by Commissioner Woodson. Discussion within the commission.
So that is just the annual, not a lifetime or like a 10-day or any?
That's
Annual only?
That's correct, Commissioner. They would not be eligible to purchase lifetime licenses, only annual licenses at resident costs.
Commissioner Cook, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Have other states done this? Do you know what their experience is with it?
No one has done one that is exactly as I'm proposing it to you today. Montana has a native son or daughter license, Louisiana, and maybe 2 or 3. Mississippi has a native lifetime license. There are variations of it across the country. I can anticipate that the next logical question is, what is this going to do financially? And what is the fiscal impact of this change? And I think that's something that's very, very difficult for the agency to predict or to project. Certainly there are some native Tennessee sons and daughters that are coming to Tennessee every year that are currently purchasing non-resident licenses at a higher rate than the resident cost. However, I think it's also likely and it's reasonable to assume that there are several non-resident native sons or daughters that come to Tennessee for a limited period of time that don't purchase a license because of the cost of being a non-resident. So at the end of the day, the best prediction or projection that I can give you is I think this would probably be a break-even proposition for the agency. I don't think it would make us very much money. I don't think it would lose us very much money.
Commissioner Watson?
Mr. Richardson answered my question. My question was, do we know what the revenue gain would be or the revenue loss would be by doing this?
And again, there's no real clear way to run a query through our existing system or to somehow identify whether or not our current licensed buyers are in fact native sons or daughters. I would tell the commission that if this passed and we lost money on it, I can assure you that the agency's recommendation would be to come back and repeal this rule if that was in fact the case. And I will also note that the commission has the authority to create licenses or create opportunities and abolish them. If a similar procedure was to pass the General Assembly, the commission would not have the authority to abolish any license created by the legislature.
Commissioner Bledsoe?
Trying to look up my own answer, but someone coming in from out of state to hunt on family-owned ground, would they not fall under our farmland owner license exemption? Because that exempts them from having a license anyway.
There's certainly well, no, I take that back. Excuse me. The landowner exemption I think that you're referring to only applies to residents of the state of Tennessee.
I got a question about that. Does that apply to a father has a piece of property that's in his and his wife's name, and his son comes back into the state to hunt, and he doesn't have a license, and Mr. Ryder pulls him over? Is he going to get issued? Is he going to get issued a citation? He lives in Kentucky, and the farm's name is actually in his father's name instead of his.
I'm looking at Tracy, but the answer, the landowner exemption that is in statute only applies to residents of Tennessee.
Director Carter, I see you may want to make a comment on that.
I may have misunderstood part of the conversation. I just want to make it clear that this particular rule is not tied to the landowner exemption. It applies to anybody that was born here, whether they have land in Tennessee or not.
Commissioner Cox?
I am, having just come off talking about the budget, and I am extremely nervous that people that are hunting in Tennessee that are non-residents and buying a license will now not have to do that by the non-resident license, and I don't think it's going to spur any activity for people who are not already hunting there, and I think it's going to cost us money, and that's why we have resident, and that's how we have non-resident, and I can't support this. I don't think that's. I think it's going to cost us money.
Thank you, Commissioner Woodson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and the question that Chris asked on our behalf in terms of the fiscal impact, I think was my first reaction to this, is wondering what the potential fiscal impact would be. And I share Commissioner Cox's concern about a potential negative impact, and I'm confident Chairman Watson's too with the Budget Committee. I do want to ask you to say again what you just shared with us, just in terms of the process and what opportunities we as a commission have to address this concern. What I thought I heard you say is that if the commission moves this through the rulemaking process, it passes, we have a year to examine the potential fiscal impact, that we then have the opportunity, if for some reason it were negative fiscal impact, that we've got flexibility through the rulemaking process to undo that decision, essentially.
That's correct. Any rule that you create, you can abolish.
On the other hand, and I've got a question coming to you related to the legislative conversation. On the other hand, if the legislature makes a choice when they convene on the second Tuesday in January, they pass a statute that essentially requires this, we will essentially, barring legislative action, have our hands tied on this issue. Is that what I heard you say?
That's correct. The only way to undo that would be then to pass a bill through the General Assembly that would repeal the any action that the General Assembly would take in January.
My experience has been that it's very uncommon, although it's happened before, but it's very uncommon for the General Assembly to reverse its action on an issue.
One such as this. Almost all of our discounted licenses, whether senior citizen, disabled veteran, handicap, almost all of those licenses were created in statute by the General Assembly, and there has never been any indication that they would be interested in going back on any of those. So I think that it's reasonable to assume that if they pass something like this, it would be very difficult to repeal, even if it had a negative fiscal impact on the agency.
Right. I don't want, just to kind of take this to at least the process my brain's going through, and my apologies for not having really thought deeply about this. This is the first time the Commission's considered this rule. Can you talk to us a little bit about, one, I want to be really clear, I don't think that the tail should wag the dog or vice versa. I think that the legislature's tasked us with a really important responsibility, which is to make these reasoned decisions and make the best decision we can for the mission and the resource and the sportsmen across the state and citizens across the state. Having said that, can you talk us through a little bit what the conversation has been in your engagement as government relations liaison between the commission and agency and the legislature, and without putting you in a box, give us some indication of the momentum this has in the legislative conversation?
Sure. We, as an agency, we deal with legislation every year that would in some way create a reduced fee for certain individuals, whether it's firefighters or first responders. There's always, consistently since I've been working here, legislation filed that would offer reduced cost licenses to certain groups of people.
Right.
And generally speaking, those conversations that I have relative to the fiscal impact of the agency are well received by the General Assembly. They understand that we are a user-funded organization and that we don't accept general fund money. So they are receptive when I tell them that this will have a negative fiscal impact on us. At the same time, ideas that I can't really say are going to have a negative fiscal impact or a positive fiscal impact, such as this one, because we really don't know until it's put in place. I would believe that this is something that the people of Tennessee would want, and I believe that this is something that the General Assembly could support if presented in the right way. So the conversations with the specific legislators that I've had that have introduced legislation relative to non-resident lifetime licenses, they're trying to address concerns that they receive directly from constituents, and those are oftentimes initiatives that a member of the General Assembly will push very, very hard. So I don't know if that really answers your question. I can just tell you that if this goes to a vote before a committee, and there is a champion in the General Assembly that's pushing it, I think it's a very difficult vote for their colleagues to vote no on, especially given that there's not a objective criteria such as a big fiscal impact negative that I can point to say you shouldn't do this.
A couple more questions. My apologies, members. So one, how much time would it take if there were an amendment to this rule change? I would assume we need to bring that at the next meeting.
I think it would depend on the specific nature of the amendment.
Let me give you a specific example. Is it possible for us to put a sunset on a rule change, on a rule as an example that 12 months from this window, this basically sunsets so that we would have a fresh opportunity to assess the fiscal impact?
I'm going to apologize, Commissioner. I don't know. I would have to research whether that would be a new one. for us to do a rule that sunsets, and it's not something I have experience with. I can't say that you can't do that. I can't say that you can.
Okay,
But
thank you.
certainly, one option that the commission would have if they desire to go that route is, and I'm looking to Cheryl and Tracy both, but I believe this rule could be rolled to the next meeting, and we could have any of those questions answered by that point.
I think it'd be interesting to, if it's possible to put a sunset on it, because I also think that even though we'd have the ability to undo our action if it had a negative fiscal impact, I also think that it's just, that's another process that's challenging, and there's an expectation in the marketplace, and a sunset at least provides another tool for us to have to revisit to pass it again and have those conversations.
I think it's a very wise thing to consider.